Too many people in this country are either asleep or they're afraid to speak or they're pretending not to notice what's going on.
Canada could be experiencing a hidden population surge. Watch this.
New neighbors move into the area, a huge high-rise building gets built.
Since 2021, Canada's population has been growing like my grocery bill, completely out of control. And
Canadians need to wake up. 1 in 4 people in Canada were immigrants in 2021 by
You ever wonder why Canada suddenly needs 100 million people?
Canada's population growth has basically flatlined.
Canada's population has broke records for the country.
Canada's population growth has slowed to 0.1%.
Canada needs to build close to 3.5 million more homes by 2030.
After reaching a population of 40 million, Canada has cracked a new threshold.
This is a great story in today's Globe and Mail. Population growth slows to near zero.
And just to give some simple statistics, our population is shrinking here in Atlantic Canada.
Welcome to Canadian Rant, the place where we say what so many Canadians are thinking but rarely get heard. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now, because this is where frustration turns into a voice, and that voice demands change. Today, we're diving into something that affects every single Canadian: population growth. On the surface, it sounds positive. More people, more diversity, more workers. But let's be honest, when the population grows faster than the system can handle, ordinary Canadians are the ones paying the price. Think about it. Healthcare wait times are longer than ever. Housing prices are through the roof. Groceries are skyrocketing. Public transit is packed. Even something as simple as getting a family doctor or affordable childcare feels impossible. And yet, every year the population keeps rising, while the services and support we need lag further and further behind. So the question we need to ask is this: how much can Canadians take? How does rapid population growth really impact your daily life? And why do politicians keep pushing numbers higher when everyday Canadians are struggling just to get by? Stick around, because we're pulling back the curtain on a truth too many leaders want to avoid.
Canadians need to wake up. 1 in 4 people in Canada were immigrants in 2021. By 2032, all population growth will be through immigration. By 2050, Canada will mostly be foreign born. Your country isn't being lost to Trump, it's being erased by the politicians you voted for.
Canada's massive population growth is about to grind to a halt, according to Desjardins. They're forecasting a significant drop in non-permanent residents until 2026, with very little recovery in those numbers taking place after that bottom is in. I've said for a while now that it was going to be difficult for Canada to sustain those massive population growth targets without having infrastructure keeping up. You're really making it less and less compelling for people to want to move here. You really start to feel this when you see reports coming out of India that international students are not choosing Canada anymore due to the lack of opportunities.
This graph right there is so dysfunctionally fucking broken. Canada's bringing 2.5 million people by 2025. The biggest peacetime immigration spike ever for a country of our size. In the span of a blink, the population jumped 25%. A quarter of the country increased in a couple years. That is not sustainable. Canada's immigration used to be based on a point system based on your education, your job expertise. We used to want the best for the best. Canada used to be a nation that upheld itself to a higher standard. Now at this point, we just said, hey, floodgates are open. Come in, it's a free-for-all.
I want that immigrant who's going to come here and there's no free lunch. Exactly. And it's going to go, you know what, I want to move somewhere that I think is going to be better for my family, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to have to find a job and I'm going to hopefully give a better life for my children than what I'm going to have. If you got a guy like that and he wants to come and he wants to work his off, I got no problem, man. Come on in. But we have to take care of our own before we take care of other people.
Canada's standard of living is falling fast. Check this out. Our standard of living is quickly starting to fall and is now way behind the US. Check out some of the issues we're starting to see in Canada that we haven't seen before, like massive job lineups for entry-level jobs and people lined up for hours in the rain to register for a family doctor, and large increases in violent crime, such as auto thefts in Toronto. In fact, experts are saying that Canada has now fallen into its first population trap, which is something that normally only happens in third world countries. This happens when a country's population grows so fast that it does not have enough resources to improve the standard of living. But even with all this happening, Canadian housing costs are still way out of line compared to the US. How do we get out of it? Economists say that we need to limit our population growth to this range per year, as opposed to what we saw last year at over 1.2 million. Do you guys think more people are going to start leaving Canada if this trend continues? Let me know your thoughts.
People in this country are either asleep or they're afraid to speak or they're pretending not to notice what's going on. This isn't about race. It's not about fear. It's not about any of that. It's about math, policy, and consequences. This is about a government that is selling this country out and doing it with a smile on its face, and the media that's more interested in covering it up than calling it out. While you have been working hard just to stay in the same place, while your grocery bill is climbing and you're waiting 8 hours in a hospital hallway, your federal government has been making moves that are going to change this country forever, and they are not being honest about it. So let's talk about the 817,000 people who just came to Canada in the first 3 months of this year. Because that's not immigration. That is a population bomb, and nobody voted for this.
Canada's population has broke records for the country in the first 4 months with unprecedented growth in the working age population group. And yes, this also blew past 2023's numbers. The country's working age population has grown more than 410,000 people within the first 4 months. This is over 47% more than last year's numbers. Of course, there's concerns that this is going to make the housing crisis even worse over the long term, and vacancies, which are already low, are probably going to further continue to drop. National Bank's best guess in this boom in population is due to the announcement that Ottawa made about reducing non-permanent residents later on in this year, which is also going to reduce Canada's population growth. This may have caused a lot of people to come to Canada before those rules take effect. So in other words, it created a short-term boom in population. The monthly increase in working age population in January this year was over 125,000 people. To put things in perspective, from 2027 to 2022, the first 4 months, the average growth in working age population is about 110,000. So January alone surpassed these numbers. National Banks expects these numbers to taper off later in the year, again because it's a short-term boom. But of course, this is going to have major implications into the housing market. What do you guys think of this news? Leave your comments down below. And if you enjoy real estate content, make sure to give me a follow.
Canada's population growth has slowed to 0.1%. A lot of this is due to the federal government reducing its immigration targets. So this came up on an app that I use for other things, but I checked through this and it looks like it's accurate. So as this says, our population growth hit a 79-year low at 0.1%. So this was in the second quarter of 2025. And as this continues, so this is due to our immigration policy changes to reduce our temporary residents. And it's also due to caps on study permits. I just wanted to put that out there because I know some people are concerned about this.
And just to give some simple statistics, our population is shrinking here in Atlantic Canada. So since 2015, all 4 provinces are seeing more people dying than being born. And at least until 2020, when BC joined us, we were the only provinces actually in that situation. And what that means in terms of the labor market is 30 years ago, for every 10 people retiring, we had 20 young people entering looking for work. Today in Atlantic Canada, for every 10 people retiring, there's actually only 8 young people available to move into those positions. So I think the challenge then becomes we've shifted from a situation decades ago where we're trying to find jobs for people. Today we're trying to find people for the jobs that we have. And so again, investment in capital, automation, AI, especially where you've got some of those hard to fill or repetitive type jobs. Immigration is also then a key strategy. How do we attract and retain workers from elsewhere? And the challenge is this is not just about high skill, high wage jobs. It's also in some of the lower wage service sectors like hospitality, some of the healthcare jobs where we need these workers.
So let's start with a question most people are too embarrassed to say out loud. Is it me, or is the whole system broken? Because when you're working full time or maybe juggling 2 jobs and you still can't get ahead, That's not a personal failure. That's a structural collapse, and it's happening quietly right now in Canada. Now let's fast forward to today, mid 2025, and ask yourself this: where's the update? We haven't seen anything new from hunger count stats from Food Banks Canada. Why no fresh breakdown by region or age or household? Because let's be honest, if the numbers had improved, we'd be seeing it in every single press release. But the silence, well, that tells us something loud. The numbers didn't go down, they probably got worse. And people aren't just skipping Starbucks, they're skipping meals. And kids are showing up to school without lunch. And seniors are rationing their frozen dinners. And yet we're told inflation is cooling and everything's fine. It's not fine.
Canada could be experiencing a hidden population surge. Watch this. This new report from CIBC claims the government is undercounting Canada's population by close to 1 million people. This could be distorting statistics such as GDP per capita and worsening our housing supply shortage. So the shortage that we're currently seeing could actually be worse. So how exactly is this possible and what's happening? Well, this report claims that the government counts expired visa holders as a population outflow, even though many of these people actually stay in Canada after their visas expire, which is leading to a major underestimate of our current population. The government of Canada did reduce its immigration targets last year, which was supposed to temporarily reduce our population, but this report basically calls all of that into question and says it's probably not going to happen. Could this be good news for Canadian homeowners and investors? Let me know in the comments down below.
You ever wonder why Canada suddenly needs 100 million people? I want to tell you about something called the Century Initiative, and it's not what people really think it is. On the surface, it's about immigration, growth, the standard bold vision for the future. The real plan is to turn Canada into a globalist outpost, one mega city at a time. What are the goals? 33 million people in Toronto, 15 million people between Calgary and Edmonton, and another 12 million people in Vancouver. Sounds exciting maybe, but until you realize this has nothing to do with nationhood. This is about money. They want high real estate prices, they want renters, and they want tax, and they want control. That welfare state has got to pay for itself. And of course, it's ran by two guys, one from McKinsey, the other from BlackRock, who are of course very cozy with the current Prime Minister. And it's quietly backed by the Power Corp, RBC, and the media barons, the Thompsons. Import more people, inflate demand, keep you working, keep you renting. That is the plan. There's no plans for culture, no plans for integration. This is all about scaling up a tax farm. Their ideal Canadian really has no land, no roots, no shared history, and that means no rebellion, no cohesion. They really just want you to be a docile consumer who's just happy to exist. If you think this is about building a better Canada, you're not seeing who this is actually built for, because it's not built for you. This is being built for the families that already own everything.
So how can the economy grow on paper while we feel worse off? Here's a simple example. Imagine a coffee shop in your neighborhood. In tough times, you might skip your morning latte to save money. And if a lot of people cut back, normally that coffee shop sales would drop. But say a bunch of new neighbors move into the area, a huge high-rise building gets built. Even if the original customers are coming in less, these new folks buy enough coffee that the cafe's total sales are improved. From the cafe's perspective, the economy, let's call it, looks fine, but per customer, business is down. The average person is buying less. And that's exactly Canada's story. We've had strong population growth, new customers, and it's been masking the fact that we're individually spending less and feeling squeezed. And it's easy for a country to have consistent economic growth overall, but negative per person growth if its population is rising faster than its GDP. And that's what we've got. We've got a positive GDP number, or we had one until last, but GDP per capita was falling because the population jump is outpacing the economy. And now we've got both GDP and population growth falling, but GDP per capita is still falling. So now you've really got what I would call double trouble, which is where the total economy is going to be suffering, individuals are still suffering, and This is going to put a lot of pressure on policymakers, on the government. People are really unhappy about this. Canada is in very dire straits economically, and there are clear political and social consequences as a result of this. I mean, I haven't personally talked to anyone who feels like their economic life is better this year than it was before the pandemic. And there's data to back this up. Canada's population grew about 3% in the last year, one of the fastest paces ever. Those new people add to the total GDP by working, spending, etc., which keeps the headlines looking decent. But without that surge of people, we'd likely already be in a full-blown recession. We probably would have been a long time ago. The Bank of Canada's economists and others have noted that if not for the population boom, economic output would be drawn down and we'd undoubtedly be in a recession territory. In other words, immigration has been the lifesaver for the total economy, even if it hasn't helped your wallet lately. And it hasn't, based on the data. It's been more of a net drain on a per capita basis. Now, here's the worrying part. That population boosts, our secret sauce keeping GDP barely in the positive, might not keep up.
This is a great story in today's Globe and Mail. Population growth slows to near zero. If we continue on this path, Canada will be in dire circumstances. I'm going to explain through a number of charts why this is extremely problematic. And you may be against immigration, but you cannot find a way to solve this without bringing people into this country. And I'm going to show you why. This is Canada's current population illustrated using a population pyramid. We have almost 20% of the population currently that's 65 years and older. The majority of Canadians are aged between 15 to 64 years old. But let's see what happens when you project this pyramid out to the future. Projecting the population out, say, just to 2038, just look at what happens to the 65 years and over group. We go from about 16 to 17% of the population to almost 25% of the population will be aged 65 years and older. Now, a lot of those 65 years old will continue to hold jobs down. They can contribute to the economy. Their healthcare should be relatively low, but they do start to need access to more health and social care programs. But also the 65 years and older group, they're currently people in employment. They're nurses, they're doctors, they're police. They provide social and community care services. They provide all sorts of public services to Canadians. But the real chart is this 80 years and older group, because this group draw down about 4 to 5 times more high intensity social and healthcare programs. And just look what happens as you project it out to 2038. So you have people retiring and you have people needing more healthcare services. So why is that a problem? It's a problem because Canada is not reproducing itself. It's not growing at enough rate through its own population growth. Just look what's happened since the 1970s. This is effectively the reproduction rate. We've gone down here, right down to about 1.4 population reproduction rate. And we need something like 1.8. So we're not growing or having enough babies basically in Canada to sustain the population demand growth into the future. So you might not like immigrants coming to this country, but you will find that if you do not allow immigrants to come into the country to fill the gaps that we're projected to have, your taxes will go up, your services will go down, and the economy will shrink.
Since 2021, Canada's population has been growing like my grocery bill, completely out of control, and no one's admitting there's a problem. And in 2022 and 2023, we added over 1 million people per year. And in just the last 4 months, we let in over 800,000 newcomers. Just for reference, that's basically the entire population of Mississauga showing up unannounced and asking where the nearest rental is. Now, here's the kicker. Even the OECD, the global adult in the room, is sending warning signs. Their quote, rapid population growth has exacerbated housing affordability. But let's get deeper. It's not just how many people are coming in, it's who they are. This wave of newcomers, it's mostly not skilled individuals moving here with 6-figure jobs and clean credit scores. It's international students. and temporary workers, many arriving with no big dreams, no housing plan, and one phone charger between 4 roommates. So let me drop this stat. Conestoga College in Kitchener has 30,000 international students in a city of 586,000 people. That's not a demographic shift. That's a takeover. It's like building a Costco on a dirt road and acting surprised when there's a traffic jam. And then, just to make it even more wild, 20,245 international students filed asylum claims last year. Conestoga led that list with 320 claims. It's giving came for a diploma but got a crash course in immigration law. So what does this mean, or what does this have to do with real estate? Oh, everything. More people, same amount of housing, no infrastructure, no plan. That's how we end up with a $2,800 basement rental and landlords advertising open concept because there's no actual kitchen. Let me tell you a real story.
Canada's population growth has basically flatlined. We added about 20,000 people during the first quarter of the year. Now, to put that into perspective for you, normally we add about 0.3% of the population in the first quarter. And that's been the average for about 10 years now. The drop is due to the government tightening its immigration rules. After COVID, we were growing super fast. We were almost competing with African countries in terms of how fast our population was growing in Canada, okay? Mainly because of temporary residents like international students. Now the government has had a change of heart and vision, and they want to shrink that group. So now there are fewer temporary residents, especially compared to last year in places like Ontario and BC. These two places actually saw the largest population declines since 1951. Think about that. Meanwhile, asylum claims are still rising. Now, Mark Carney says this is intentional. He says that he wants population to be more sustainable or to stay at more sustainable levels. Now, the thing is, Canada has a lot of aging workers, and I don't know if you realize how many people over 60 and 65, maybe even 70, are still working in the GTA especially. And so the government, I guess, had the idea to bring in these young people to replace the aging workers that were eventually going to be phased out of their jobs. So bottom line, the government is trying to slow immigration down, which, in my opinion, it's obviously the right thing to do. When you think about how fast our population was growing and how overwhelmed our infrastructure system is, there's no way we could have kept that up. It was cracking, and it effectively already has cracked when you look around. And so this major drop in immigration levels, I believe, could have a massive impact on the housing market. Because one of the big factors a lot of realtors would say is, we have tons of immigration coming to the city, especially Toronto. This is why real estate prices will continue to go up over the next few years. Well, no, that whole story is completely gone, right? Those immigration levels are nowhere near where they used to be. So what does that mean for home prices? Well, it could mean, rents actually keep going down, right? Because if less people come in, and usually these new to Canada people are renting, right? Usually they don't buy a house right away. They're going to start renting. And so if there's less new people coming in, we could see rental prices continue to decline. So let me know what you guys think of that.
Immigration in Canada has spiraled into utter madness. Almost 7% of people living in this country hold temporary work permits, student visas, or are seeking asylum. When you factor in illegal immigration, that number jumps to around 10%. In other words, a significant portion of people living in Canada aren't Canadians. Meanwhile, the rate of permanent residency is climbing each year, with 2024 on pace to add over 500,000 new citizens with similar targets over the next 2 years. In fact, the only countries growing their populations faster per capita are in Africa, and even then, the percentages are pretty close. Anyone not blinded by woke ideology can see the devastating effects of this mass migration. Crime is surging, housing is increasingly unaffordable, healthcare is collapsing, wages are stagnant, and young Canadians struggle to find summer jobs, while taxpayers foot the bill for all of these problems. As Canadians line up at food banks in record numbers, asylum seekers are being housed in hotels at the taxpayer's expense, receiving individual benefits that outstrip what the average Canadian earns per year. Now, there are 4 underlying reasons for this unsustainable rate of immigration that few are willing to discuss, so here they are. First, government social programs like the Canada Pension Plan are essentially a pyramid scheme dependent on age demographics. With Canadian birth rates below replacement levels, the government is importing a new tax base from developing countries to keep these programs alive. Two, this so-called cultural enrichment actually leads to a fragmented society, making it easier for government to not only manipulate and control us, but also implement egregious policy. While citizens bicker over group grievances, they fail to recognize the state as the true source of their problems. Third, the government is colluding with transnational criminal organizations, including the Sinaloa cartel and Chinese narco groups, for political and financial gain. The evidence is abundant, and this corrupt alliance thrives in a diverse population, as any criticism can and has been dismissed as racist or xenophobic. And finally, the government can obscure the reality of Canada's declining productivity and stagnant wages by artificially inflating GDP through mass migration rather than genuine economic growth. But make no mistake, when total debt is considered without subtracting non-liquid assets like CPP, Canada's debt to GDP ratio plummets to 26th out of 32 countries. Now, I want to be clear about something here because people are often quick to conflate these things when they hear information that does not really comport with their narrative. This has nothing to do with any particular race, religion, culture, or ethnicity. This has to do with the well-being of Canada for Canadians, a country that is already the most diverse in the world. So, it's time to shed the illusion that this government's actions are motivated by altruism. Canada's current immigration policies are unsustainable in steering us towards the collapse of our culture, infrastructure, and economy.
After reaching a population of 40 million, Canada has cracked a new threshold.
Where are we all going to live? We are all going to be living in tent cities, in compound camps. You remember the movies Hunger Games? That's where we're heading. So either you're going to live in the capital with the rich, where you have everything and you can have all these properties and empty houses and you don't care because you have a lot of money, and the rest of us will live in districts. That's what's happening. Canada is becoming that because that's all I see. Because all I see is these people who are telling me, oh, just leave Ontario. Like, just leave Ontario. I can't. We all work hybrid jobs or fully in the office. So that means we're bound to the city because we have to be able to get to work. I can't live 2 hours outside the city if I got to get to work every day. And the cost of gas and transportation is really high. So not only do I have to pay to go to work, to make money to pay to go to work, I can't live that far out for my kids. That's why I'm moving back to the city. I moved out of the city. I left the GTA. I moved to the Niagara region to save money. But I have to go back because my daughters have jobs in the city and they can't afford to pay rent. So I have to move back so they have somewhere to live.
And that's the truth. Population growth in Canada isn't just some abstract number. It's something you and I feel in our daily lives. It's the reason why a trip to the emergency room can take 10, 12, even 16 hours. It's why young Canadians look at the housing market and feel like owning a home is no longer a dream, but a cruel joke. It's why rents are climbing faster than wages, why public schools are overcrowded, and why basic services are stretched to the breaking point. Now, don't get me wrong. Canada has always been a country that grows through people. Immigration built this nation, and diversity is our strength. But here's the uncomfortable reality. When growth outpaces planning, when people are added faster than homes are built, faster than hospitals are funded, faster than infrastructure is upgraded, then growth isn't progress, it's pressure. And that pressure is crushing everyday Canadians. Think about it. We're told over and over again that growth is necessary, that it's good for the economy. But whose economy are we really talking about? Corporations? Developers? Politicians? Who brag about record numbers while ignoring the human cost? Because for the average Canadian family, growth hasn't meant opportunity. It's meant higher grocery bills, longer commutes, and fewer chances of ever getting ahead. Here's my opinion, and you may or may not agree. The problem isn't the people coming in. The problem is the leadership at the top. The government sets sky-high population targets without building the homes, hospitals, and schools needed to support them. They talk about immigration as if it's a number game, while ignoring the reality that real people, both new arrivals and longtime citizens, are struggling in the same broken system. It's not fair to newcomers, and it's certainly not fair to Canadians who have been here all along. And while all this is happening, the wealthy and well-connected keep winning. Developers charge more because demand is endless. Corporations get cheaper labor. Governments collect more in taxes. And who gets squeezed? You, the middle class, the working poor, the young generation trying to start their lives. If we don't stop and face this head on, the gap will only widen. More Canadians will lose hope, more families will consider leaving, and the Canada we know, the Canada we love, will slip further out of reach. So here's my challenge to you. Speak up. Share your story in the comments. Tell us how population growth has impacted your life, whether it's housing, healthcare, or just the day-to-day struggle of living in a system that feels rigged against you, because your voice matters here. And if you're tired of staying silent, if you're tired of being ignored, then hit that subscribe button and be part of this community. At Canadian Rant, we're not just talking, we're building a voice strong enough to demand change. This is Canadian Rant, your voice, your fight, your community. And together we won't be ignored.